Welcome to the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter study group. This is September 14th of 2023. This is our 91st class. Today we're going to go over the techniques, lessons learned, and non-functional requirements analysis. The Tampa Bay, Florida chapter is an international chapter, and our mission is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. We've given you a variety of ways to reach us. This is our Thursday night study group. We have it every Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Cliff will drop the link to our past recordings in the chat. We also have an IIBA website, Meetup, Zoom, Facebook, and LinkedIn groups. You can reach us any way you want. We have partnered with Watermark Learning. They've provided us a discount code, TAMPA21 will give you 20% off of any of their products. In exchange for being our sponsor, they also allow us to use their practice study questions for the CBAP and the ECBA and the CCBA. We encourage you to check out what they have. We are a volunteer-led organization. You'll see Cliff here in his Millennium Falcon, sorry, wrong word. Yulia is a CBAP that has earned her CBAP after being a member of our study group. She is now our Vice President of Finance for our chapter. Caitlin and Priscilla are members at large. My name is Thea Soren. I'm the Vice President of Career and Professional Development for the chapter. If you have any needs, have any questions, reach out to me. Reaching out to me through LinkedIn is the most effective way. If you're interested in becoming a board member of our chapter, it doesn't mean that we're going to ask a whole lot of you. It means that you are part of our decision makers, and you might have something you want to contribute for 2 hours or 6 hours or whatever you want. It could be something that you haven't done in a while, something you want to learn how to do, or something you're really good at. So reach out to us and let's see if we can put our board on your resume. Because we are a study group, we have to have a CBAP in residence, and we have two. And today, Bob Churchill, you'll see his picture here, and he's right up here. He has joined us because he is here with us. That means that this hour qualifies as an education hour for you. So whenever you go to apply for one of your certifications, if you need education hours, this hour qualifies, and every other hour that you spend with us does as well. Bob has an awesome website. It's rpchurchill.com. I'll show it to you in just a minute. I'll show you one of the many pages so that we'll talk about what techniques we've already covered. We have a number of people that have been study group members who have gone on to earn certifications, and we want to celebrate those wins. If you've been a member, whether it's attending virtually by our recordings only, or if you've been a member by participating in our conversations, reach out and let us know. It's encouraging to us. We're one of the few chapters that don't charge for study groups. We don't charge for mentoring. We don't charge for anything. We're doing this because we want to elevate our community. We want to elevate each member of our community. So reaching out just gives us the encouragement to continue going forward. Okay, as I said at the top, we're going to talk about lessons learned and non-functional requirements analysis. I'm going to give it to Bob and let him take over the screen. While Bob is getting ready to start, if you have any questions or have any comments, we encourage you to join in. Bob does a fantastic job of preparing for these, but your education, your experiences help enrich our whole conversation.
Okay, can we all see this?
Yes, we can.
All right, so lessons learned happen in a lot of different ways. And as you see in the article, which you can find on my website on the blog, just use the search bar and look for lessons learned. You can see the date, March 3rd of last year, 2022. I've talked about this subject a few times in some other posts, but mostly let's talk about what's going on here. And what the BABOK says, and I quote, "The purpose of the lessons learned process is to compile and document successes, opportunities for improvement, failures, and recommendations for improving the performance of future projects or project phases." So that's actually a pretty good definition. And what you're really trying to do, if you think about all of this in terms of my 6-phase model, you're always learning how to do every phase of the process better. You're learning from your customer as you iterate through each phase. You learn to keep the whole sweep of the project together or in mind, and in a logical hierarchical order by iterating between phases. And you're also working at a lot of different levels. So every time you're trying to improve the analysis you're doing for the solution, you're trying to generate for the engagement at hand, you're also trying to learn how to work with the customer better, and you're also working with the team better. So you're operating on multiple levels all the time. And when you're done with an entire engagement, it's a good idea to wrap up all the documentation, have a formal review of with the requisite and appropriate stakeholders, and really see what you learned from the process. So reviews happen on short skills, or lessons learned, I should say, happen on short time scales, longer time scales, and so on. And each individual person has a whole lessons learned they accumulate through their entire career. But mostly this is a way to formally think and talk about these kind of things. And if we look at the specific case of Agile and Scrum, you're familiar with the loop, with the sprints. And if you think about the ceremonies you have at the end of every sprint, the product review and the team review, I can't remember, the sprint review and the sprint retrospective, they are forms of lessons learned, right? So you're always trying to do things on many different levels better. You're trying to write all that down, or keep it saving in some way that makes sense to you and the other participants. And then you want to use that information to do better going forward. That's really what it's all about. So if you think about the way Scrum and Agile are done, or let's say Scrum in particular, you've got the sprint backlog, and you've got this backlog, and this thing appears magically in this diagram. Nobody knows where it comes from, right? And the way business analysts work is they do the intended use in the conceptual model. So what's going on now? What components and raw materials can we build the solution out of? And what are the requirements? That's what most of what we as BAs do. And then we stick that information in the backlog. And then with the help of the BAs, they the implementation teams pull items out of the backlog and do the design, implementation, and test. I should have these in a different order, actually. Both of these. That's interesting. I've been looking at this diagram for over a year and I'm just now seeing that. So how goofy is that? Anyway, I've been mapping my 6 phases to the 6 knowledge areas in the BABOK, and I realized while I was on my long road trip from which I have finally returned, and actually the whole BABOK doesn't talk about the implementation in testing and acceptance phases very much. So I have to redo some of my diagrams and cross maps. I'll talk about that. But anyway, all these are forms of lessons learned. So most of what happens in Sprint and Agile is over here. And we as BAs do a lot of this business. So we are involved in the design, or at least the specification of the solution to a degree. We help evaluate alternative solutions and pick the best one, but then we don't do the other part. But lessons learned happens every time you do this in this diagram. However, when you're repeatedly going through this how we do as BAs, we also do lessons learned. And the product owner and any other people he, she, or they are working with, they do lessons learned also as they're rearranging and grooming the backlog. So basically, looking back at what you've done and drawing lessons from that and doing better going forward is what lessons learned is all about. Does anyone have any questions? Don't all jump at once.
I don't hear any questions, but I do have a comment. I'd like to remind people, whenever you're working on lessons learned, it is to improve your process. It is to make the next phase better. You know, next time you do it, let's do it better. But it has this wonderful side effect of getting people to give you their ideas, and that causes an emotional investment. When people are emotionally invested in an improvement, they're 100% more likely to actually care about it, to invest their time and effort into it, to get behind it. And if you can get everyone in the team to be contributing and to be discussing, and then y'all come up with something that you're going to actually try, the whole team becomes emotionally invested because they know it came from them. They're not being told what to do. They're not being robots that are being programmed to say, you will do this differently this time, or you will add this to your system. It comes from them if you're doing an agile process. So that emotional investment is extremely valuable whenever you're talking about if they're going to participate, if they're going to try, if it's going to be meaningful to them.
So remember, you're along those lines, you're working at multiple levels. The solution is obviously the thing you can learn about, but you're also working with the team, with customers, and everybody else. So there's methods of communication, understanding the language, building up trust. All those are legitimate and important parts of the lessons learned process.
Yes, absolutely. You know, at our organization, we're trying to really use the information that people are taking the time to document as lessons learned, and really focusing on mostly the project managers at this point in time, because we don't have too many BAs, but to document it using a project online tool, which then for their lessons learned, and try to do it at each phase gate. And then that data goes into a database where we're using Power BI reports to pull out the information. And we have a communication expert who was just recently completed a huge ServiceNow project, and she is really looking closely at the data to try to categorize it, put in themes, and then it looks like we'll be reviewing the lessons learned information at project management office meetings that we have every 3 weeks. So the lessons learned are definitely very valuable, but sometimes we get so busy doing our work that sometimes we forget to stop and really smell the roses and take advantage of all that information, that golden information.
Interesting. Sherry, I'd like to encourage your organization to be aware that there's different levels of maturity in different groups. And so what is best practices for one group, another group may not be there yet. So you might have to kind of create a tiered system of lessons learned that may apply in categories for the different maturity levels.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll definitely just see. I'm hoping that we'll be able to see the data in our next meeting, which I think is next Thursday.
That's great.
Yeah, so we'll see what she is determining and how they plan on moving forward to use it.
That's great. I hope that y'all can find a way to measure the satisfaction with the changes. If they just do a 0 to 10 scale on how satisfied am I with what we've done, how much improvement has it made, how much time have we saved, you know, a couple of very specific measurable things that they can measure. It's going to not just be, we implemented the good things. It's, we implemented this and it caused these things and we were able to measure it.
Yeah, good point. Okay, yeah, definitely. I'll mention that to the person who's.
She's probably already thought of it.
Maybe, yeah, she's really good. So we'll see. I'll ask her though. Good idea. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else about lessons learned? Bob?
And to build on that, Thea,
Oh, yeah.
I would say that the stuff that you implement and it actually fails, you learn more from.
True. Celebrate
so
the
many
failures.
people are, yeah, people are afraid of the failures, and it shouldn't. Unfortunately, it's that way, but it shouldn't be. I mean,
that's one
reason
reason
Edison said, you know, we failed 10,000 times, but we learn something from every failure to actually succeed the 10,001st.
Right. Agile has a tenet called fail fast. So you try things in small bites and you determine what the result's going to be, instead of we're going to do something for 3 years and then see what the results are. So trying those things in small bites, and trying them in a couple of different groups, maybe see what it does.
The other thing I would add, probably in summation, is that this doesn't have to be a big, heavy, formal process. I mean, I know you have sprint reviews, which is mostly sharing your increment with the customer, and the retrospective is the team talking amongst itself about how to do better next time. But you don't want, with most of these techniques, you don't want something big and formal. On the other hand, there's very often a tendency when you're done with a project to just everyone scatter to the winds and start working on the next thing, and not wrap it all up and take a little bit of time to really write down and put things in order. Just that little bit of effort can pay big dividends. If you're just rushing off without thinking about and talking about what you've done, it's kind of penny wise and pound foolish.
True. There's two things I'd like to add before we move on to the next topic. Whenever you're talking about lessons learned, don't forget to talk about the lessons learned. What are the benefits of doing the things that aren't necessarily related to the project? Maybe the way y'all communicate, maybe having a team building. Those things need to be measured. Are they valuable? Are they something you want to continue, or are they something you don't want to continue? Do you want to use teams? Do you want to only do things in person? Those things need to be measured and talked about in lessons learned as well. And the other thing is, in lessons learned, people give feedback. If you don't let them know you're using their feedback, even if you're not taking their action, if we're recording it, we're discussing it, we're evaluating it, if they don't see anything that comes out of what they say, they're going to stop talking to you. They won't continue to try if they see no results of their efforts, especially if they're introverts. Extroverts, people like me, we talk out loud because this is the way we think. We think out loud. And then sometimes we stop and go, wait, that was a bad idea. Introverts, they think very quietly, and then they come to you, and sometimes it's hard for them to come to you with an idea. Whenever they come to you with that idea, that is a piece of them. And usually their ideas are much better thought out than anything an extrovert's going to say. If you don't take it seriously, give them eye contact, sit down with them, understand, where did they come up with this idea? What do they think it can be used for? Give them some time. Then do something with it. Or they're not going to give you another one. They're not going to risk another piece of them. So this is taking pieces of their souls and being good stewards of what they give you. Okay. Anything else for lessons learned?
Okay, let us move forward.
Okay.
Let's talk about non-functional requirements analysis. So, I don't have a lot written here, and you'll see why. It's not really a very complicated concept. So, as you know, requirements in my 6-loop model and is the third phase. So you've got the intended use, where you define the overall problem. And you've got the conceptual model, where you figure out the as is and maybe some raw material of what the solution's going to be built out of. Then you have requirements, and after requirements, then you've got design, implementation, and test. So there are two kinds of requirements. Functional requirements talk about what the solution does. It's the actual solution, what it calculates, what it takes in, what it spits out, all the ways you interact with it, the benefits it gives you, and so on. And it describes the things that the solution is made up of, the components, the behaviors, entities, actions, inputs, output, all that. What non-functional requirements are is they talk about what the system is. So how robust is it? How flexible is it? How much uptime does it have? How usable is it? And those qualities are often expressed in terms of words that end in ility, like reliability, flexibility, maintainability, scalability, usability, and so on. And there are some others, words that take on slightly different forms. I always think that also non-functional requirements covers the maintenance and governance of the system. How are you going to support it, use it, maintain it, change it, give access to it, and so on? But that's kind of a side issue. So every time you list a requirement, you have to include criteria by which they will be judged upon implementation to have been met. And this is true for both functional and non-functional requirements. What you're generally trying to do with the acceptance criteria or definition of done or what have you is come up with a yes or no answer. So you might be turning a vague concept or some kind of a numerical thing into a binary choice. It either works or it doesn't work. It's either acceptable or not acceptable. And when you look at an entire project, whether you're going to accept the whole thing, you might have some if everything is acceptable and everything passes and everything binarily meets the established requirements, then you accept it and credit it, right? Or you could refuse and not accredit the solution if the if enough things are wrong or if nothing is right. But also, if many things are right, but some minor or even important things are wrong or not finished, you might do a partial acceptance. Again, that's a slightly a different topic. So there's a Wikipedia page that talks about a list of non-functional requirements, and there's so many things here. There's approximately 50 of them. Many of them end in ility, but as you can see, there are a lot that don't. So it's a general rule that they will take that form. And many of these items have whole articles that are written about them. So this is a subject, well, the BABOK doesn't say much, and my article doesn't say much. There's actually quite a lot you can dig into if you want to. So let's talk about some of these. Accessibility is who can use it. Do we have to worry about disabled people using it? Adaptability, can different kinds of people use it, or is it applicable to different situations and operating environments and so on? So let's randomly skip around whether something is open source. Are you going to be bound to a particular vendor solution with all their software licenses, and potentially the company goes out of business? So I used a piece of simulation software. It's language called SLX. It's basically a mildly object-oriented version of C that has a lot of discrete event simulation capabilities built into it. And it was a great language, and the guy supplied it. And then I found out recently that he died a few years ago. And anybody that has one of these dongles you have to put in your machine to make the language work, you're toast, right? If anything goes wrong, there's no more support. I know that when I was in the paper industry building turnkey mechanical pulping lines to make paper to feed to paper machines, so we'd turn the wood chips into pulp. That's the part we did. And then somebody else would turn the pulp into paper. Our uptime was 95%. That was our guarantee at that time. And that was a recent increment. Companies had been guaranteeing 90% uptime. I always like to build modular solutions because you can build more maintainable, more flexible and adaptable solutions by using common components. So they don't actually include modularity on this list. They include a few things that are adjacent to it. So that is what I will say about non-functional requirements. So remember, the functional requirements are what a solution does, what pieces it's made up of, and the non-functional requirements are what a system is, the qualities it has. Any questions or comments? I know Thea has a demo in the further discussion she'd like to go into, continuing something she started talking about a little while ago.
But first, do we have any comments about non-functional requirements? Does anyone have an example of how you document your non-functional requirements? Is there anybody? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was curious about that because at our organization, we use a system called ALM, and we document all the functional requirements and test scripts and test cases and defects and that sort of thing for functional, but not non-functional. So for us, it's probably just in a spreadsheet somewhere, stuck in a file in our SharePoint directory. That's what I'm guessing.
I would encourage you to create your non-functional requirements to go along with your functional requirements, to say, for instance, the user can sit in the desk. You know, it's a chair that's attached to a desk. So you're going to talk about how high the chair is going to be, and how big the chair is going to be, and what color the chair is going to be, and how soft the chair is going to be. The things, I mean, it's beyond they can sit. There's other things about it that whenever they're building it that they need to consider. And whenever you're talking about things like the American Disabilities Act, you know, it has to be this way because of, and you need to cite the requirements or the regulations that impact it. So if you could just put it all together in your requirements tracking document, or your JIRA, or, you know, Rally, whatever you track your requirements in for your stories, you can keep it all together so it's not off in somebody's file someplace.
I wanted to share one other comment or insight or whatever, and that is that I always conceive of requirements traceability as involving links of everything in both directions. So you're always doing things that are responsive to the intended use and the what's going on now. I've expanded this a little bit, so when we're designing future solutions, some items in the conceptual model for the as is state, some of those may go away. They may be replaced by other things or whatever. And that's an example of cases where items might not link in both directions logically across all the phases. And if we're able to do this, we can ensure that we don't do any work that is not responsive to what we're trying to accomplish. And we do make sure that the design meets all the requirements, the implementation embodies all aspects of the design, and every implemented item is tested and accepted. But another potential place where things aren't always linked in both directions is non-functional requirements. You can think of them as being just injected at the requirements level. So that's just a visual, conceptual thing. You can also say that, hey, these really do map back to the intended use, because that says something about the kind of system we're trying to create here, or the kind of solution, but that's just something to think about. And I will turn it over, barring further comments, to Miss Thea. So,
yes, I have a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Please.
we can.
Yeah. So about non-functional requirements, I think it is always always a good practice to look for ways to quantify non-functional requirements. yeah, for example, if you call it like your software should be available or easily accessible. I mean, this non-functional requirement is really hard to follow and really hard to measure, and that's why there are some ways how to quantify non-functional requirements. And one of the ways is to use some kind of a percentiles. Let's say like your software should be available 99.9% time or something like that. Or for example, your software should be easy to use, and there's not always an easy way to quantify a non-functional requirement, but there is always a way. I mean, we should look for a way to quantify it. Even something like when stakeholder says your software should be very easy to use, and you can always come up to something like to implement or to use a specific function of your software does not take more than 30 seconds or 1 minute or something like that.
Right.
And that will be a way to quantify, for example, easiness of use or something like that.
Absolutely true.
Those are great points. I tried to touch on those at when you're turning kind of nebulous requirements into binary yes or no requirement. There's also things that have to be based on expert judgment. Does that look right? Does it feel right? And sometimes you cannot make things explicitly go no-go, but you try as often as you can. Excellent point, sir.
It's important that with every requirement, you talk about what is your acceptance criteria. And it's even better if you'll go on to say, how can we test it and what does success look like? If you can do that, I mean, there's some things it's going to be like the product owner says it's good enough. Okay, but you have a way to do it. It's known, documented. This is how we're going to decide if it's good enough. I've heard people say that the system should be intuitive. What does that mean? How do you measure that? Your QA people are going to come and choke you. You need to have something that give them something to test that they can say, yes, it has met the criteria. And even if it's the product owner says it's good enough, okay, fine, but get it documented at the beginning, because that will really help the folks that are doing the development or the building or whatever they're doing to know if they're on the right track, if they're getting close to achieving what your goal is. Otherwise, they're doing whatever they think they're supposed to do.
And this goes into a definition of done in many different guises. And again, like I mentioned previously, the BABOK doesn't talk very much about implementation and test, but I think we as BA should really be involved and concerned with that through the entire project life cycle, so we can ensure there are lessons learned pulled out of all that changes and things we learned during those phases are reflected and potentially modified and updated requirements in design and so on.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about this topic?
Go, girl.
Well, I just want to say this is probably one of the hardest things to do, is document things that are not easy. I mean, how do you say we're going to paint the wall a certain color unless you get the color, the numbers that can measure the color? It's like, how many blues are there? I was going to walk y'all through a game of fire poker tonight, and I honestly can't figure out how to get the interface to work. But I put the website in the chat so you can look at it yourself and see if you can get it to work. But what it comes down to is whenever you present it, you can share a link with your team. Everybody can look at their cards, pick a card, and then whenever the last person that is signed in picks the card, all the cards show, and then you can talk about who chose high or who chose low, or everybody chose the same. We can move on. So fire poker is really awesome for that because it doesn't use peer pressure to achieve your evaluations. It uses everyone's actual experience and their beliefs, and then you can talk about, do you know something we don't know, or did you rate it low because you thought it was easy, or did you why did you rate it high? Fire poker is cool for that. But we have time to do something else, and I'm going to walk you through a different thing. We were talking about trying to understand what people mean whenever they don't give you good requirements. And we were talking about trying to get good requirements, but let's talk about a scenario. Let's say that you've got a bunch of people sitting around a table and their boss walks in for a very important meeting and he says, I want you to build me the perfect house. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the people around the table. You've got Marge, who is overworked, so close to burnout she can't stand it. Whenever she hears the term the perfect house, it is on an island someplace far away from everybody and nobody can reach her, and that would be the perfect house. But then you got Tom sitting next to her. He spent the weekends building the perfect dog house with his Cub Scout son. And so whenever he hears the perfect house, he sees something totally different. Every single person around that table is going to hear something different unless you give them specifics. And that's what we have to do with our requirements, is give very specific things of this is what done looks like. And whenever you're going through your story refinement, whenever you're going through your story sizing, everything, ask, does anyone have any questions? And especially ask, QA, how are you going to test this? And have them walk through it verbally. They can actually document it on the story of how they're planning on testing it before this, that's even better. But that way the tech guys, the tech leadership, the product owner, everybody can go, oh, that's not going to test it right. Or you need to know this other thing that we're bringing in. But get it down to how are we going to test it and what is going to be tested so that everyone's on the same page and your whole team can be going the same direction. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. Well, I've run out of things to tell you today. Does anyone have any experiences about being a business analyst that they would like to convey?
No, I will admit, though, I like your analogies because I have the same face when somebody tells me something like that. It's like, well, I want it to be easy. Well, what's easy for me might not be easy for you, and vice versa. So, yeah, those kinds of words are like trigger words for me. Or I want it to be easy to use.
Yeah. That's one reason we use things like we draw pictures. The interface should have a menu that looks like this, and then everyone can see the same picture. These are times that a picture is worth 1,000 words.
That's why we iterate. That's why we have glossaries. That's why we have data dictionaries. That's why we keep communicating until we all understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
By the way,
yes.
one thing Thea said a little while ago was she started listing a bunch of books that would be interesting. So if you will at some point could share with us your books that have been influential on you doing business analysis or some other things. We'd love to devote some time one evening to talking about those.
Yeah, what do you have? Oh, your screen is so good. We can only see your face.
Yeah, I know. I was being sarcastic. I put up the Harry Potter books because I'm magical.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. Let us talk about, we've got 7 whole minutes. Let me talk about the other side of business analysis. We gather requirements. We know we gather requirements. We document them. We communicate them. We know what we do. Let's talk about how we facilitate our teams. We watch their expressions to see if they look confused or perplexed or they don't care anymore. We see who is attending the meetings to see, are people skipping meetings? Those are red flags. We sit down, we take people to lunch just to create relationships. We find things that we have in common so that we can create relationships. There's a whole lot more about being a business analyst than just gather requirements. Part of gather requirements is getting information from people. The best way to get information from people is to develop relationships and build trust. If they trust you, they might give you the information. I have sat down with so many people and they'll say, are you here because they're going to fire me and they just want to know how I do my job? They really are afraid of it. I'm coming in to document their processes, and I have to be very sincere and very genuine and explain to them that if we can document their processes and if we can find the areas in which they have to spend so much time doing those manually repetitive, boring things that we can maybe automate, and we can find where their pain points are and maybe find a way to solve their pain points, we can take care of some of those things that make their jobs not fun and give them more time to devote to the creative, the things they wish they had time to do, the things that they could improve. That is where they grow. And if they will invest in that time, and then you send them the document back that says, this is the process that I think you showed me. If you would like for me to walk through it with you to be sure I truly understand, they get so excited because, number one, they didn't really think you wanted to know. And now you're showing them that you really did want to know, and you're really understanding, you're really grasping this thing that nobody's shown any interest in what they do. You're doing it. You're documenting it. You're validating that you have the right information. You're making corrections whenever they tell you. You're showing interest as you continue. You're getting excited, and you're doing the thing that feeds all that other stuff. Sometimes they don't even know where they are in the process. They do not realize that the step that they do, or the 15 steps they do, is the critical pin that everything else flows off of. You show that to them, they start growing inside. They start kind of going, oh, this is cool. I didn't know I was that person. I didn't know that whole department depended on me. I just knew that I got yelled at if I didn't get it done on this date. Well, there's a reason. Then we start making improvements, and we start taking out that stuff that you're doing this thing and that other department's doing this thing and they do it before you do it. So you don't have to do it anymore. You get it documented, you get it improved, you start making the improvements, and they get excited and they grow. It's like a physical way to see them grow and get engaged in their jobs. Sometimes they start getting a voice and they start saying, you know what I do is important. And I think I need to speak up in this meeting and say, I think we need to do this thing differently. And they'll grow in the company. Sometimes they'll move up. But either way, they start liking their jobs better. They start feeling like there's a good reason for them to come to work. We start improving their job by automating those tedious, repetitive things. We start improving their job by taking out the things that they didn't need to do. We improved their job by resolving their pain points. I one time found a lady who her entire job was to, on a Selectric typewriter years ago, to type return address labels for the company. I was able to say, did you know that Selectric typewriter has a memory and all you have to do is hit these 2 buttons over and over and it will do it for you? She spent the entire day typing the return address labels until then. And then I said, but if you set it right, it will do 50 at a time and you don't have to sit here and do it. We were just able to make her job better, her life better. It's just awesome, the power that we have if we invest and focus on what we can do to help people. Okay, guys, that's all I have for today. Let me show you one thing real quick. Let me share the screen. We have a couple more requirements, techniques that we have not yet covered. Let me move this down here. I'm going to move it down here. rpchurchill.com. If one of you gentlemen will drop this into the chat, we have all of these techniques that we have covered. Cycle 1 we did before. We're in cycle 2 now. So things like balanced scorecard, benchmarking, market analysis, anything that has a space here we haven't covered. If you're interested in talking about this, all you have to do is show us what the BABOK says. If you want to go further, show us what the BABOK says, go through it with us, and show us how you use this in your job or your experience with it, or if you do some internet research, how it can be used as a business analyst. Because what we want is we want to have a conversation about that technique, how it's used in the different ways in the BABOK, so that people can take the test and pass with understanding of that technique. So if you're interested in any of these, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll get you signed up for it. I need to know when you want to do it, what Thursday night you want to do it, and how long you think you're going to want. Do you want the whole hour? You want 15 minutes? You want 30 minutes? Whatever you want, we'll work with you. We'll help you. If you want to do a practice run with me, I'll be glad to do that with you before the class, and we will make you come out looking smart. The reason to do this, you help us with the chapter. You help elevate every business analyst that watches it live, participates in the conversation, or watches the recording. And you can use this on your resume and on LinkedIn that you presented during an IIBA international meeting, and it looks really good. Okay.
Also, I will have that page updated by the time I go to bed tonight, to have tonight's information in the previous 3 weeks that were missing.
Bob has been traveling the world, and so he's a little bit behind on keeping this updated. But guys, I want you to see this. This thing is fantastic. It has links of the knowledge areas. It has links to all the recordings that we have recordings of for all the different lessons, for all the techniques, for our professional series, for everything. And Bob did it all. So him being behind a little bit, we can forgive him. And thank you, Bob. Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Cliff too.
Oh, and Cliff too. Cliff did a whole bunch of the work too.
Yeah,
we have
no,
fantastic
Bob did a lot.
We have fantastic people that keep our chapter going. We would like for you to be one of them. So if you'd like to participate, reach out. We won't ask more than you want to give. We will see y'all here next Thursday night. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
See you guys next week.